Hi, I'm Richard Q, and this is my podcast, Electric Communion, Conversations in Clubland. The dance music industry, like the entertainment industry as a whole, is a hard nut to crack for those wanting to carve out a full-time career. In the digital age, it seems like everyone's a DJ, myself included. In most cases, apart from the few lucky ones, you need the production chops and a string of bona fide releases under your belt to actually get anywhere these days. You could always try your hand at promoting your own night, but that's certainly a surefire way of getting yourself on the bill. It's still not always easy. The idea for this podcast was born out of the desire to talk with some of these people who are out there trying to make it. Through frank and open conversations, I aim to find out more about the challenges they face, the successes they've had, the highs, the lows, what motivates them, as well as hopefully gleaning some advice along the way for those listeners aspiring to make it out there themselves. Electric Communion, Conversations in Clubland. Hello and welcome to my first Electric Communion podcast, Conversations in Clubland. I'm sitting here in the home studio of producer, DJ, promoter James Flavell, and we're in Brighton, just down the road actually for myself. I guess just for the context of listeners, I mean, this is not the first time we've met. We met, when was it? I think in maybe February this year.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
One of your AVOY nights, which we'll talk about later. And yeah, I guess we connected through the love of electronic music, and here we are now. You're a producer, you're a DJ, you're a promoter. Would you kind of say in that order in regards to kind of priorities?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, I'm a producer first. The promoting side of things is something that's quite new to me, and I've kept it in my hometown and kept it quite small and haven't taken too many risks with that yet. Something I'd like to do, but yeah, the production is where my heart is, and it's where I 100% spend most of my time. I still think people can DJ and not produce, but I think it's more difficult, and the people that are doing that sort of found their feet in an era where it was more common anyway. So they're sort of, people like Dixon, they've earned their stripes so much that they don't have to touch a piece of music again. They're such taste makers in the scene that people will continually go and see them DJ. And I think that's something that should definitely still remain, because there's a lot of pressure with if you haven't made any tracks, are you worth your salt as a DJ? When I think you really can be. And often producing can actually, take so much time that you might take your eye off the DJing game. So, yeah.
I mean, they definitely go hand in hand together now, don't we? I mean, it does seem that to kind of, be a success in the kind of world of DJing, you do need to produce.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to a lot of people about this recently, and I have had some success in releasing tracks and producing and having some of my tracks played out in sort of bigger circuits, but I haven't been as successful in terms of going at getting gigs. And there's also people the other way around where they're getting gigs but they wish they were better at producing, or have had tracks out on labels. But I genuinely don't think that you need to pick one or the other. You just have to go with your kind of, if you gravitate more towards producing, then the DJing will come later. And if it's the other way around and you're getting the big crowds from DJing, then those crowds that you're getting are only going to be more excited when you suddenly start making music. So
just for the benefit of the listeners, I mean, tell us a bit more about the kind of music you produce in regards to genres of music. Is it one specific genre, or are you quite versatile and you like to experiment with different genres?
Yeah, I mean, in short, I don't really know. Let's say it's more on the melodic, emotive techno side of things, but there's also kind of definitely a more house element to my music. But when it comes to production, I'm not a type of producer that will sit down and be like, I want to make a track that sounds like this artist, or let's aim to get a track on Innervisions. As much as that would be amazing, they're always a year or 2 years ahead of time when it comes to music anyway. So I guess I don't really know until my sound's only what it is on the last track, and then the next track could be a different sound.
So let's go back to the beginning a bit. I mean, in terms of you being a producer, kind of where did it all start? I mean, talk a little bit about your younger days, because you're from Devon, right?
Yeah, I'm from, well, actually, I was born up towards this way, more in sort of Surrey, and then relocated down to Devon. And I wasn't in the sort of dance music lifestyle genre, whatever. Back then I was playing in bands. Started playing drums when I was 10 years old, joined some bands in school, eventually joined a band in the kind of punk rock and roll genre, and we had a fair bit of success and were touring and whatnot. And yeah, once that band finally finished, I moved up to Brighton. Yeah, started getting into music production. I was already into, even when the band was still going, I was sort of split between half my time listening to punk and rock and roll and the other time going out to see Dixon and Arm and whatever, and going to parties in Bristol. We used to get the train up and go to warehouse parties there and whatnot. So I was kind of crossing over. But even now, apart from producing and DJing, I don't listen to a huge amount of dance music sort of in my personal sort of life, walking around with my headphones in. It's usually something more in a rock or funk or whatever, because I like to sort of give myself a break from that, but also take influences from those genres as well. Yeah. You said about playing in a band. Tell us a little bit more about that then. Were you kind of making a little bit of a career at that? Yeah, I was. I mean, we did the whole circuit of playing, your pubs and your small clubs and whatnot, and we got a booking agent after a while, and PR agent and manager and whatnot, and started touring pretty regularly. And kind of, it's funny because we were kind of a bit bigger in like Europe, like Paris. We had a following, and France, Germany, Belgium. What was the band called? It was called Rat Attack. Okay. Did you have any album releases? We had a couple of EPs. We had like 3 EPs, and we were on the track to do an album, but our singer quit the band, which was a great shame. He kind of started going out with a girl that was kind of took him off the track of what he wanted to do, and kind of manipulated his mind, a bit of a Yoko Ono. I was going to say the same. Yeah. Lennon, Yoko Ono. And that kind of spun out of control a little bit, but it's it's been a hard one to kind of get over, because it was my dream since a 10-year-old playing. My parents didn't even buy me a drum kit at the beginning. I was playing on like pots and pans, and I remember having an old straw bin as a hi-hat and like doing that, and they weren't, even though my parents were doing well at the time and whatnot, they were like, we're not going to get you a drum kit because you were serious about skateboarding and you were serious about football, and then and then once they saw that I was really serious about drumming, they finally got me a drum kit. But yeah, like the band got all the way up to, we did Reading and Leeds Festival, we were getting Radio 1 play, and it felt like it was really on the cusp of something really, really great, and yeah, that kind of fell apart. So once that finished, I was like, there was literally no point for me to stay in Devon apart from my family. So I had a few friends that were up in Brighton Uni, and they said, look, like, come up here, and great music scene, great food scene, because I was working as a chef at the same time. So yeah, I just took the punt and came up here and haven't really looked back.
So going back to melodic house, what's the current state of the scene in the UK at the moment? Yeah, I mean, maybe I was a little bit naive and I wasn't making connections with enough people, but I remember a couple of years ago thinking, God, I'm gonna have to pack up and move to Berlin to make this thing work. It doesn't exist here. Of course you get your big artists come in and play in super clubs, Fabric, Printworks, whatever, but I was like, where's the ladder that I want to climb? Where's the first run of the ladder? And more as I started networking and meeting people, I started realizing that there's some real sort of hidden gems in the
in the UK scene, and promoters in London that also are artists as well are really sort of pushing things forward with that. You know, you've got people like Nick Castle who have single-handedly, you know, like Labyrinth it's just straight up the biggest artists in our genre, and all the parties make perfect sense, and that's why they sell really well. Then you know, my good friends, the duo Monica, just released on Red Culture, and that's Hardt Antoine's label. So he's really pushing things forward. There's
and those guys are from Brighton as well, aren't they?
Yeah, from Brighton. Yeah, very good friends of mine. Owen also made the journey up from Devon, so we're friends from there. But yeah, there's a lot of people pushing it forward and going, and I think like the more of us, everyone that I've met is really cool and, you know, nice and giving me advice, and to be able to get a scene together like that, it's only going to grow bigger as everyone keeps doing more parties, booking decent artists, and investing in the parties themselves.
I mean, obviously, you know, I'm a big fan myself, and I kind of play that music, and just from following DJs, producers on Instagram, you know, you do get the kind of feeling that it's much bigger on the continent, but it does seem to be changing literally over the course of the last 6 months. I mean, you know, we've seen quite a few big DJs either played in London over the last 6 months, or they're going to be playing. We've got Arm and Ivory, Arm and Trikk, which we've got tickets for, and then we've got Ivory, and that suddenly seems to be this kind of explosion of these artists.
Yeah, and there you go. You've just named Labyrinth parties, so they're the kind of the brand to look out for. But yeah, of course, I think there's a lot of risk. I mean, the thing with London is like you can sell out a night, or the night could be a flop because X, Y, and Z other DJs are playing next door. Whereas in Brighton, if I put one of those DJs you've just named, there's not going to be a competitor in that genre playing over the road, but also we don't have at the moment enough people that are kind of into that scene to make them worthwhile. So I guess the London scene maybe only gets bigger and bigger because London will then be the base or the place people that go to that aren't getting what they want from their city.
Electric Communion. Conversations in Clubland.
I guess this is a good time to talk about your night, AVOY. How did that come about? When did that start?
When was the first one? Well, it was under a different name. That originally, like, quite cheesy. I had the name, obviously I'm Faide, and the parties were going to be called Faded, and then I thought, you know, that kind of makes it sound like it wasn't intentional, but it made it sound like it's about me, which I didn't want it to be. Of course, I put myself on the parties because, like lots of people do, it's, you know, it's a chance to showcase yourself with that artist you're putting on, and you're obviously going to network with them. And so many people I've spoken to say, you know, if you can't get the gigs elsewhere, or you can't release the music, you know, do it yourself. Yeah, so that's kind of venture for that. But yeah, shortly after that, I did one party, the Faded one, which we hosted Kadosh, which was really cool.
He's a producer from Israel, isn't he? Yeah, he's also the head honcho of the label.
Yeah, Fraublau.
Fraublau.
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, really good example of bringing someone over that you're not sure that they're going to pull a crowd or the scene's big enough. And it wasn't, you know, it was an intimate party, but the people that wanted to be there really wanted to be there. And yeah, we kept in touch, and obviously after that we released a collab EP together on his label, Fraublau. So
that track was called Matanot, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a couple of tracks, Matanot, then another one called Nelam, and then there was the remixes by Zombies in Miami and Manpower. And then my friends also brought Manpower to Brighton, so it all kind of ties in quite nicely. But going back to the AVOY parties, after I did that one with Kadosh, I released a EP on Plano B called AVOY. And AVOY stands for All Versions of You. So the basis of the party is, it's kind of like, I felt like it was a non-intimidating, but by what I say is intimidating is sometimes people go very intense in terms of it's like techno and it's this, or dress in black, or that's the vibe, or a very dark poster. We kind of made it a bit more like lighter, like for example, that the design, each party had a different color, usually favoring prettier colors rather than sort of the dark moody vibe. So yeah, that's kind of like the thing of like having the longer sets is the idea that DJs can start as one version of themselves as a DJ and finish as a different version.
And like, you always book a DJ. Talk about kind of what you're looking for in the DJs.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a small party on a small budget, the idea is to really try and catch DJs that are on the up, that if I book them now, then let's say in 6 months' time, they're going to be playing rooms 10 times bigger and they're going to be out of my budget. Although some of the DJs have become good friends of mine, so I'm always sure that they will cut me a favour if they come back. But I
mean, June's a good example of that, isn't it? I mean, that's when we met, isn't it? In February, he was headlining, and from my point of view, I met him and I've been following since. His career seems to have his career trajectory just seems to have gone up and up and up. He's now playing, all across the world. Yeah. He's in South America at the moment, or he was. Mexico, yeah. And production-wise, he's been quite prolific, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'll invite someone to play, and then quite often I feel like when we start talking, that then that DJ is going to be like a friend from the off, because because I let them know it's a small, intimate party. And I'm not going to say, I'm not using the word intimate to mask the phrase, I can't really pay you or whatever. Like, I pay as much as I possibly can, and I spend out money on decorations and whatnot. But like, from the first part of the conversation that party, that person is playing it because they want to come and play Brighton, or they've heard good things about it, or they've heard my music or one of the other residents' music we have. So yeah, I guess it's a party for DJs to play to a crowd that they want to play to.
So talk about AVOY. I think you mentioned it earlier. You've got a track called AVOY.
Yeah.
Shall we play that track now?
Yeah, let's go for it.
So that was AVOY, came out on Plano B Records late last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was September 21, yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit about that track?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I remember that track I was on. This isn't something I usually do. I usually get rid of tracks, but I was persistent on this one. If it wasn't working, I was on like AVOY version 13 or something, and it was it was getting to the point where I was like, this isn't gonna get there for me. But then I think I tried one more synth or something just shifted the whole mix and made it sound cool, and then at that point I sent it to a friend of mine, Vicent, who is the owner of Plano B, the Brazilian label, although he now lives in Lisbon. Really cool guy. We spoke loads in lockdown, and yeah, he wanted to release the track on his label, among with one more other track that I did, and remixes by Martin Tanner on both of the tracks, which is really cool. We were only planning to do one remix with him, and then seek out another producer to do the second remix. But we sent him both the tracks, and we were expecting him to pick one and give us a remix based on the one he liked. But he sent us back two incredible remixes in the space of like a day or two, and we were like, that's all we need. I actually don't want to send it to anyone else to remix, because both remixes were so different and so good and so unique, and the production level was just insane, that we decided to do it as a basically like Faide and Martin Tanner, as in he's on the remixes and I'm on the originals, and yeah, that came out and got really good feedback on it, and it's kind of quite different to some of the other tracks I've produced. But yeah, again, with each release, the kind of sound changes a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Martin Tanner, actually. I definitely, check some of his stuff out. I think it was a 3-track EP that I released recently that, it's just an absolute banger. I mean, you touched upon, obviously, sending out to labels. I'm always interested, kind of the process. You've got a track, you're happy with it, you want it released. Do you send it out to the label that you ideally want it to be released on? Is that how it works? And you wait, and if they kind of not you bite, you then go on to another label?
Yeah, I mean, all the advice that I've ever got suggests that you have to play the waiting game, and you send it to the label that you want, big or small, and then at least wait till they've listened to it. If you don't get a response, everyone's time frame might be different, but let's say, for example, you don't get a response in 2 weeks, because a lot of these label owners, and certainly if they're DJs as well, are very busy, and it takes them a long time to properly listen, or listen a first, second, third time, or quite often the test will be, how does it perform in front of a crowd? They'll play it in their sets. So yeah, you have to be incredibly patient. I think that's something I'm really getting used to. In the sort of success of my previous band, it was a very, very steady climb, and in this DJing world, it's kind of one thing happens, and then it's a case of just waiting, and then something else might happen. It might not be as big, and then you're going back down to what feels like you're starting off again, and then something else. So the kind of patience thing really pays off when you're sending music to labels, and often they say, even such things like putting it on SoundCloud as a private link, making sure that it has virtually 0 plays, because there's this kind of exclusivity rule in the genre of, if someone else has heard it, then it's not, it's like finding gold for the first time with some of this stuff, which I don't really know what to think about. At the end of the day, like, I'm not the sort of person that's like, oh, if someone else has heard it, then it's not valuable. But some people see it as like an exclusive rights thing. So yeah, make a track, always sit with it for a fair while, because again, like, I've made the mistake before of sending stuff to labels that I'm actually not happy with. and then in ways you're like, it's weird. I've sent stuff to labels before and almost been like, I sent it to you 2 weeks ago. Now I really wish I could fix this and fix that, and I've changed the arrangement, and I actually don't want you to respond to me because it's not good enough. So yeah.
We've just been joined by James's beautiful cat, Malcolm.
Yeah,
isn't it? I mean, I think we just need to take some time to talk about Malcolm, because I've been here a few times in the studio and he kind of hangs out. What kind of cat is he? He's absolutely amazing.
So he's a British blue short hair, and he's literally my son, and he is my main little producer, right hand man. He sits with me all the time in the studio, and he's a big support. And yeah, it's a shame that you actually can't see him right now, but
we need to take a picture of Malcolm and maybe put it up.
Well, he actually does feature on quite a lot of my social media posts. Yep. That's probably the ones that get the most likes. Cats on Instagram, but he does have an Instagram, Lord Malcolm the Blue, if you want to check it out. So,
I mean, you just mentioned social media, so why don't we talk about that now? Obviously, it's kind of a big thing now as a producer or an artist. You know, you got to kind of really push the social media thing if you kind of want to make a success. I mean, would you agree? And I mean, what's your take on it? Do you enjoy the whole kind of social media thing, or do you find it a bit of a chore?
I don't. I through years of being in creative industries, whether music, food, or whatnot, like I and my partner's a stylist and a photographer herself, so she helps me a lot. But like I feel like I'm quite good at it, but I can't do the don't want to call it the cringy side, but the side where you're just showboating more than you have to. Like I really, if I've got a track out, or if I'm playing or whatever, if I've got something really great to share, I will share it, but I won't. If someone says, oh, the Instagram algorithm says you have to do 3 posts a day now and 2 reels, I'm not I'm not doing enough, unless you want to see 3 reels of my cat, which probably could actually get my success a bit further. I don't. Yeah,
I mean, do you think that promoters, that's kind of one of the first things that they look at, your Instagram profile, how many followers you've got, and they base whether they want to book you on that? Is that reality?
100%. Like, it's, if you've got that many followers, you might have that many fans, and they might come to the gig. In which a promoter, like, I fully understand. It's like anything, like, like if you want to fill a restaurant and the chef's more known, like, it's going to help, like, all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, like, even people that pick people on the amount of followers, they'd struggle to defend that that's a good thing for music, because I don't know how it can be in any capacity, because you're going to miss out on all these people that are in the studio creating really good stuff. They're maybe shy, they maybe don't have the technology know-how, but maybe they have, like, the way around the synthesizer is like second to none, and you will miss out on those people like breaking through. And this idea that you have to have that side to you, and you have to have, in some ways, a level of vanity in your day-to-day sort of life to be able to go, this is me, or this is what I'm wearing, or this is what I'm doing, or the conscious thought to just be like, people need to see this, when anything before, for example, obviously, like we've touched on, me working as a chef, like, people don't even think now about getting the food and just eating it. They don't think about going to a gig and just experience it. Like, prime example being, we've joked about it before about, like, saying to DJs, what's your favourite phone to play to? Like, when they're playing in Printworks, you're playing to 5,000 phones. Yeah. Like, it's just that's the world we live in, and you can't avoid it. So there's no point, I'm going to sound like a 6-year-old man if I'm bitching and moaning about it. So I'm part of it. I'm involved. Will I be getting a TikTok tomorrow? Don't know. Ask me in 2 weeks. Probably, yeah, because your arm is twisted, you're forced into a corner, and that is just the world we live in.
Okay, watch this space, listeners, then.
Yeah, I'll be doing the dance.
TikTok, yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd definitely pay for that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you talked about chefing. We touched on it before. I mean, talk a little bit about more. You trained as a chef?
Nah, not really. To be fair, it's actually not something that I massively wanted to do. I kind of just fell into it. I remember going for a job at a summer job at like a water park type place, adventure park, and I wanted to work on the slides for a few weeks whilst I was off between school and college. And they were like, we don't have any space anymore, but there's room in the kitchen. And I went to work in the kitchen. And then someone says, do you want to come and do some salads? And then someone says, do you want to come and work on starters? And before you know it, you're 15 years into a chefing career. And that's kind of what happened. But yeah, I mean, I worked my way all the way up to being a head chef of a restaurant here in Brighton. And yeah, food has loads of similarities with music in terms of, you know, if you're putting a track together or putting a dish together, there's ingredients. Some of them work together. Some of them sing. Some of them are easy to make work. Some of them don't work at all. And I'm both self-taught in the chefing world and the music world. And in both respects, you know, they got pros and cons. Like sometimes I feel like I've really found the hard way round of making something work, but I've also found a way that makes my sound or my food more unique.
And you're not chefing now. Were you for quite some time? You were kind of balancing between being a head chef, weren't you, in this restaurant that you talked about, and obviously doing your production. And now you've kind of put the chefing on the kind of back burner, so to speak. Yeah,
I mean the idea in the last job I took, because it was more of a daytime restaurant doing some events and pop-ups and whatnot, but the idea was to get out of, you know, high-end dining that's going till 1 o'clock in the morning, because for obvious reasons that's completely not compatible with a job that, you know, DJing, that you also have to work within those hours. So yeah, I thought that doing this most recent chefing job that I could sort of finish at 5 o'clock, come home and produce till whenever. But it became, because I became so invested in it, it became so exhausting that even when coming home, I kind of stumble up the hill with exhaustion and kind of drop down on the sofa. And because I've been running a kitchen pass for so long and delegating and speaking to 5-6 other chefs, my mind then couldn't get onto Ableton and start producing music, because I was spent in terms of that mental and physical capacity. That, yeah, I just realised that something had to give. So handed in my notice as a head chef, and now I'm putting 90% of my time into production and trying to navigate around the kind of scene in general of, you know, networking, speaking to more people, because, you know, what happened is you will say to someone, you know, like, I'd love to play your party, or can I send you a press pack? And the response really often would be, you know, oh, just come to the party on Saturday and come and say hello, come and find me. And that's really what you want to do. You want to be fresh in the promoter's memory. And my answer was always, no, I can't. I'm working. Or I'm working the Sunday morning, so I'm not going to London to possibly not get back till 5 a.m. to work at 8 in a very demanding job. So yeah, something I had to give. I worked super hard in hospitality, and now I'm enjoying the benefits of working so hard, giving myself some time and space to passionately commit myself to music for at least 6 months before going on to anything else.
Electric Communion, Conversations in Clubland.
I think probably this is a good time to kind of delve into more about your production, your approach to production. So you said then you were self-taught, and you've been doing it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot. Obviously, I'm not a producer myself. I hear a lot about the word workflow, and I kind of think I've got some understanding. Could you kind of just explain a little bit more about what that kind of means and what your workflow looks like?
Yeah, I mean, so I used to So I started working on Logic at the beginning, and that was good and whatnot. But then I was speaking to more producers and friends, and they were kind of singing the praises of Ableton and talking about the workflow and the creativity and the kind of very adaptive style it has in terms of capturing things in real time. So I did a course to sort of ease the transition from one to the other, because they are quite different. There's similarities with all DAWs, all the softwares, but I did the course on Ableton and started progressing on that, and I've been on Ableton now for about 5 years.
So just for those people who maybe are not familiar with Ableton, it's a piece of software, right?
Yeah. So it's called Ableton Live. It's a piece of software. I know the guys that developed it are producers themselves. Can't remember who they produce for now. I'll be kicking myself because I'll remember it later. But yeah, the software is just insane. It's genius. Like the stock plugins, it all looks very, very simple. It almost looks kind of 80s-esque in its kind of presentation, but there's a lot going on underneath the hood, so to speak. It's very well orchestrated software, where for me personally, like, I produce mainly inside the box, which means not using much sort of external hardware. I've got a few bits in the studio, but the main stuff that I use that's not inside the box is more percussive things. Like, you know, I've got hi-hat. Like, being a drummer, like, it makes sense for me to grab a drumstick and hit stuff. Like, it's actually I'm in any sort of musician capacity, that's, you know, something that I can call myself qualified as. So shakers, we've got a cool shop down in Brighton called the African Drum Shop, I think it's called, and I've gone and got bongos and shakers, and they're in the studio here, and I use them as much as I can. But in terms of like synths and whatnot, I use a lot of the Arturia plugins.
Did you see a lot of like producers, you know, in their studio, they got racks of keyboards, and what you're saying is that you don't really kind of go for that approach, really. So that in the box means just kind of you utilising the stuff within Ableton and the kind of software that you can download.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so it's like there's stuff within Ableton, and then there's external plugins, and it really is like a minefield of, you know, there's just so much, and you would have seen it from even like the recent Black Friday sales. It's like you can have this and this and this and this discount, and it's just like, I think you need to find a few tools that work for you and just work with them consistently. Even if they're not like high-end plugins, like, you will find a way to make them suit your sort of style and sound good. So yeah, that's my workflow is, I'd say, in terms of creating a track, like, I lean towards drum elements first, but I really don't need much more than a kick and a hi-hat to start kind of building something up.
So that's how you kind of work. You start with the drum. You don't ever kind of start with a melody. Do you have something kind of in your head, or do you just literally start playing about on Ableton with kind of drums, etc., and go from there?
Yeah, I mean, what I would usually do is I might take some inspiration from like a sample pack just to get like a vibe going. I might end up replacing those sounds with some live bits and bobs, but sample packs are really great to be like, you know, let's say, for example, like, I don't know, I've been listening to Kind Music or something. I mean, we obviously went to see them the other day, and you're in a real vibe for making some of that tribal, more Afro house or something a bit more pumping or sort of cross genre, and you're like, right, where can I start? Instead of getting the bongo off the wall, I'm just going to grab one of the loops from Rampa's sample pack, put a kick drum over it, and be like, let's create a vibe. And then if at the end of the day I'm like, right, I'm not exactly just going to leave that on there, because I know that that's the exact bongo loop from a big track of theirs. So I will take my bongo drum that I have here and recreate it, or get an Ableton drum rack up and start messing around with sounds. But yeah, essentially there's no rules. It's completely different to, being in a band, and there's, we had a drummer, a bassist, a guitarist and a singer, and it's like you stick to what you're in front of your instrument, and you go for it, and then you create a sound. But with this, it's almost like there's almost too many possibilities. So
I understand that one of the inspirations for one of your biggest tracks was what came about just sifting through sample packs in Ableton.
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting like some off the cuff tribal vocal pack from. I always look for ones that aren't really super well known, sort of. So I'll go right down. If I search tribal vocal on Google, I'll go to like page 20 and just find some random one that someone's put up. But I was skipping through some of the sort of one-shot vocals, and I found the vocal snippets that built the track Gunner that I had, that came out on Stil Vor Talent, which I initially started off and then sent to the producers, both Argentinian producers, Brigado Crew and Uber, and they sort of developed the track, and then eventually we got it released on Stil Vor Talent. But that was kind of the snippets of the kind of tribal African-esque vocal were just some small samples from a huge pack that really just shows the benefit of painstakingly going through every single one and finding the sort of the gem in there and trialing it with some instruments, and it can often lead you to spark some amazing creative ideas.
Yeah, let's play that track now. So you've been a producer for 10 years now, you said. How, in that time, has kind of your approach to production evolved?
Yeah, I mean, it's been like 10 years since I first probably downloaded my first serious bit of music production software and tried to create a whole piece of music. But officially, maybe like as what I would consider myself an artist, probably like the last like 5-6 years, I've really sort of started consciously thinking about, like the progression of my music and where it's going to go and what labels I want to send to. I'd say probably now I've relaxed into it a little bit more and realised that everything doesn't have to be perfect to be able to achieve the results of, a good track that people will listen to. Like, one person, massive inspiration to me, is Jimi Jules. In lockdown, I watched his masterclass on Free Labs. They did a lot of producer masterclasses that really helped me sort of get through lockdown. There was one with Era, there was one with Toto Chiavetta. like I said, Jimi Jules, and they were great because you sort of get an inside view of how those producers create tracks. And there's people that are super technical, and there's other people that resonated more with me, like Jimi Jules, who has this kind of DIY, almost punk attitude to making music, in terms of like, they don't record something in and try and make it sit perfectly in the mix in the first like 5 minutes of recording it and start EQing and compressing. It's more about just capturing a feeling, and he describes it as the mess, and this kind of like getting, finding sort of beauty in the chaos and whatnot, where he'll just hit record and just play and mess around and turn anything into an instrument, grabbing a microphone and flicking the light switch on and off, running a drumstick along like a ceiling fan. It could be anything, just to create some sort of musical effect. And that's why his music is so unique and so dynamic, because it's not all just digitally created and perfected and quantized. It's off the cuff. And originally, when I first listened to his tracks, I thought he must be going through this amazing technical process to get those results. And then I saw the view inside his Ableton, and it was like stuff going into the red, stuff clipping, stuff distorting, all the things that I thought was an absolute no-no is a way that he got his sound. So really, in some respects, of course, there's some mistakes that, are not going to be beneficial when you start playing stuff out in big sound systems. But this having sort of no rules outlook on it really helped me a lot to start really sort of letting loose and creating stuff that's natural and not in the mindset of this has to be release worthy the second I record it in.
And something that I know I've seen on Instagram, your Instagram, you've got a field recorder now, and you're kind of going out there trying to record more kind of organic sounds. How's that going? Have you kind of introduced those into some of your tracks?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, being a drummer, like I get very frustrated with the musical theory side of things, and getting that melodic side down, and that's often a reason why I discard some tracks, because they've got a great rhythm and whatnot, but I can't get that feeling, that melodic vibe into it. But when it comes to the percussive side, I'll grab some drumsticks, I'll take my field recorder out, I'll go to, the last time I went to a local park, and it had railings, it had bins, it had metal bins, plastic bins, like all these different sounds, and they all have their own reverb, essentially, from the sort of the atmosphere around them. Like, if you smack a bin that's, close to a wall, it's going to have a different vibe to hitting a railing that's just by the water or whatever. There's all these different sound reflections that you can capture, and rustling leaves, anything. And I like to just dot them through my productions now. And essentially, if you record a sound, go out there, it's unique. It's got its own unique, material. It's not, there might be something kind of similar, but it's not going to be exact. So that's what I like about that.
And a good example of what we're talking about is your latest track, Celebrating Rain.
Yeah.
Because you recorded on a very rainy day outside your house.
Yeah. I mean, that track, like I said as I did an Instagram post, like that track probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that rainy day. Like there is a you can hear it more in the break, but it continues through the whole track. There's like the sound of the rain in there, and a couple of other like dripping sounds, and I think like a splashing in the puddle that was created from the rain. It was like torrential. It was like next level. And I know that day I cancelled plans and was going to go out, so that's just an example of like capturing
typical a rainy day. In England.
Feeling. But it came out, to be fair, as like quite like a club-based track, but it's based off that kind of that feeling, that melodic, like dark, slightly darker energy, but with a kind of hopeful twist in the sound that and the kind of the the mix down on that track, like I wasn't quite getting it where I needed it to be. Like I mixed it down okay, but it just sounded like too nice, a bit too sterile, a bit too flat. So I ended up sending that to Matteo, who does the quite a few of the mix downs for Ivory, because I wanted that kind of sound that's almost not too polished, but also very it's quite forward. It's quite, you know, like when it comes on, you know, it's a track of that you know, that it's kind of like, listen up, your ears are going to perk up, you need to be back on the dance floor if you know hear you getting a drink or you get into the toilet. So like I went with him for the mix down, and the label mastered it, and it just came out fantastic.
Can you tell me a bit about what that means, the term mix down? Because I'm surprised, because I thought, obviously Ivory, for those people who don't know, is really on the top of his game at the moment. Is just released an album called Feeling on Innervisions, which is a big Berlin label headed up by Dixon. We've talked about him before, and Christian and Frank. I thought, I'm not really, I don't really know much about producing myself, but I thought that's something that you do yourself.
Well, I mean, this is why I've got bogged down in music before, because I've been in the mindset of like, oh, if I've arranged the track and I've recorded stuff, then I'd be selling myself short if I hadn't mixed it. But it's a completely different craft in itself. It's working with frequencies and volumes and dynamics, and quite often you want someone to mix your track that is listening on fresh ears and doesn't have that attachment to it, and can just listen and go, right, this hi-hat's not wide enough, or this isn't like that, or punchy enough. And it's very similar to like a film. If you've got Brad Pitt stars in a film, he doesn't then go and edit it and then color grade it and then press the final tape, the film. So it's a case of just knowing what your strengths are. Mine is the creative side. Yes, I'm trying to improve some of my mixing and learn more technical skills, but you don't want to get to the stage where you're like, okay, I wrestled with mixing it for 2 weeks. I wasted 2 weeks. Now I don't like the track.
Do you always get someone to mix down your tracks at the end?
I was trying to work this out the other day. I think I've nearly done about half and half. Half of my tracks I've mixed down. I don't master any of my own tracks. It's always the label that does that, and they have their own engineers they work with to kind of have that general label sound. But yeah, sometimes mixes just fall into place. Sometimes you intentionally or unintentionally mix as you go along, and before you know it, all you need to do is get that final volume there to make it comparable with other tracks, and then you're away. But then sometimes I use the word wrestling with it. It's like painstakingly going through. You feel like it's a complete tug of war, like you change one thing and then something else suffers, and then you don't have the technical skill to fix something, so you become frustrated, and then you might essentially get rid of a bass line that sounds too distorted or too whatever. But really, if you'd sent it to a mix engineer, they have the knowing to get it to where it needs to be. So I think that's really important. And recently I even did they did like a Frank Wiedemann did a showcase, like a masterclass type thing, where they showed how they made their track, the iconic track Reg, which springboarded them to the success we know them for now. And even they said that went to a mix engineer, and since then they've always worked with mix engineers. And I always thought, the genius Frank Wiedemann, there's no way he would use the mixing engineer. But again, it goes to show like different skill set.
Yeah, Frank Wiedemann, one half of the duo Arm. I've read a lot, or I've seen a lot again on social media, etc., about how producers often find it kind of really hard to kind of let go of a track, to kind of finalize it. There's when to say kind of enough's enough. Do you kind of have that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a hard drive that I just refer to as the graveyard now. It's just, I mean, I've made the mistake before of getting rid of something, and then someone someone asking me like, oh, if I've got any ideas that suit this, or we could do a collab, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've got this idea, and then I'm like, oh no, I deleted that idea. So it just joins this massive, like, I think it's like 2 terabyte hard drive. It's just a bottomless pit of ideas that I haven't finished. But because I produce alone, I don't work with that many other artists in terms of the initial stages of creating a track. I often am in conversation with myself only, and that often will make me second guess things more than someone saying, oh, you know, there's something in there that could work. I might get rid of it. But yeah, again, through watching more masterclasses and stuff like that, you realise that producers often do that. Yeah. And I used to be like, oh, okay, right, I'm going to write 5 tracks and get frustrated if all 5 weren't good. And now I'm looking for the 5 in the 20 that I write that are the ones to send out to labels.
Have you ever kind of left a track for, quite a long time, thought kind of that was it, and then returned to it, and then, actually it's become one of the tracks that you released?
Yeah. I mean, I think my track, Wow, which is, I mean, lots of people say that's my best production to date. It came out as one of my first releases on a local Brighton label, Dino Audio, but they were local, but they had a lot of clout. Like, it was played at, Burning Man, and Nick Warren played it at his Soundgarden parties. But yeah, that was essentially like a track that I remember being just about to ditch. And then I worked with a music tutor that my friend recommended that was just had that kind of music theory head on them, and they helped me sort of navigate the scale that it was in and develop it and make it a little bit more of a dramatic piece rather than a kind of single tone to it. So that was one that was nearly in the graveyard.
You just talked about Nick Warren, obviously a big DJ. I mean, to me, it seems kind of these days the kind of barometer for measuring whether your track is a success or not is whether a DJ of a kind of certain status like Nick Warren, or we talked about Dixon earlier, kind of plays that track. Is that kind of what you hope for? Is that what all producers hope for? I mean, I guess really that can make or break a track.
Yeah, I think, well, going back to what we were saying about, like, social media and everyone, DJs playing to just like a sea of phones and whatnot. It's like that is essentially what it feels like now, in terms of like the audience are going to say, these are the 10 big tracks. Like, the DJs will play them, but, it's how much they get shared and promoted online that's going to be testament to, like what's going to be the next biggest thing, or the big producers or whatnot. Like, prime example is like, Jimi Jules' City's on Fire. Like, if people didn't film it and they weren't bothered, and it was one of the tracks that just fell by the wayside, as much as it's an incredible track, it could have not been filmed a million times and put out there, but it was, and then it sort of does that. But in terms of like is it what we're looking for is, like 100%. Like, if I have a bucket list, it's there's a few things. It's like release on this label, play to this size crowd, have a DJ of this caliber, aka your Dixon or your Arm, play one of your tracks, because it is the kind of confirmation that it's good, because they get sent hundreds of thousands of tracks on the daily, and it's the best of the best. So yeah, I'd be lying to say that it wouldn't mean a lot if someone like that played it, but I think it would make more sense for me to be playing tracks that I've made myself to a crowd that's enjoying them. I don't seem to become, like, apart from Dixon, like, I don't seem to follow people for massively long periods of time, and it, like, it's always evolving. There's always like a newer thing, but like, I mean, artists I love, like, I mean, Adam Port, we obviously know he's 1/3 of Kai Music, or 1/4, should I say, because Resnick sometimes plays with them. He's certainly a producer that. This is the thing. I was going to say everything he touches is gold, but that's the stuff that they release. So it's really important to notice the stuff that goes on behind, and that's sometimes the mind space I get myself into of like, oh yeah, they're better than me or whatever. But it's like they'll have the 100 tracks they didn't release. But aside from that, producer-wise, obviously it goes without saying now that like Ivory is just like it's weird because I don't love all of his tracks, but every single production I can see the merit in it being amazing. Jimi Jules just pushing the boundaries and you know, like, has a very close place in my heart when it comes to the kind of the punk music side of things and doing that kind of bit more of a DIY sound. Era, another Innervisions artist, like I absolutely love. Like, you know, Ralph's such a cool guy. Like, you know, my good friends had him in Brighton to play for their party, and he was just like the most humble guy. Scatman as well, like a really unique sound. Like, it's super, super hard to sound unique, especially when we all look at what plugins each other use, and you know, because you hear something, or you know, the classic, you know, the hardware synthesizers, and yes, you can get a million different sounds from them, but it's hard to stand out. So that all those guys I've just mentioned, I feel that they stand out. So they're kind of my favorites.
You mentioned earlier then about kind of comparing yourself. It's, you know, you find yourself often comparing yourselves to other DJs, and I guess, you know, we've got to talk about mental health. Obviously, we've come a long way, much more open and understanding about kind of people's mental health, and you know, the pressure that people's work and life can kind of have on their mental health. And obviously, in the fickle business of, you know, music entertainment, you know, does it affect you, for instance? So when you kind of see other people's work and life can kind of have on their mental health, and when maybe their kind of career trajectory kind of maybe takes a different course to yours, maybe more successful, you know, kind of, does that affect you, and kind of how do you deal with it?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like the kind of, I think the comparison thing is a never-ending void now of it's chasing the horizon. Like, you know, it can go in any line of work. Like, it can literally go to the point where you're the multi-millionaire, but you're not the billionaire. You've got a small boat and they've got a yacht. Like, it just keeps going on. There'll always be someone that appears better than you. But what I've realised now, I'm meeting more DJs, is let's say there's a DJ that has been lucky enough to play Fabric or something before, but they still haven't. They've released like a track, but it's not on a label that they deem as big enough, and then they're like, oh, I would really love to release on Stil Vor Talent. It's like, well, yeah, I've had that, but then I would also love to have something you have, i.e. like playing Fabric or something. So there's always, like, I think more often than not, you realise that when you compare and think someone's better than you would, you know, if everyone put their problems in a big pot, you'd most likely rather come out with the ones you put in there, because they'll always be, you're usually much better off than you deem to be, especially if someone like myself that has his own studio and is releasing music. But it's just, I think for me, it's my struggle is the amount of time it takes, and the amount of dedication, and the kind of the process is never easy. And like I said before, it's ups and downs. You'll have a release on a bigger label, and then you might not have anything for ages, and then your Instagram followers might go up, then they might go down, and you know, it's just, you got to be sort of grateful for what you have.
Okay, final question. What's the future for Faide? What can we expect? What's coming up?
So my last release, Celebrating Rain, came out on Mood Music, and from that I've had some more interest from various labels, and it's kind of picking the right one to send music. I'll probably send music to a few anyway, because I've become friends with the people that run these labels, but I'm just trying to figure out what's the best course of action for my next release, because I'm starting to become a bit more conscious that I would like to find a home label for like 2 or 3 releases, rather than jump into different labels, for every release. So I'm trying to figure that out now. Like, I'm always making music. Just need to finalize some bits, and I think I have a collection of tracks to send out, and then just working on trying to get some bookings. It's my favorite bit is still DJing, without a doubt. Like, I don't think I put enough energy into the networking and the getting the gigs, but that is the ultimate goal, isn't it? To like play your music or other music you love and have people enjoy. There's no better energy than the actual dance floor and DJ and the crowd feeding off each other. So I want to kind of get into that space a bit more.
Cool. And so, if listeners out there want to kind of follow you, where can they find you?
So on the old usual platforms. Facebook is at /Faide Music. Got Instagram Faide_music. SoundCloud is /Faide Music. So yeah, just follow me there. I'm also obviously on Spotify, all my releases, and Beatport. So if you can support any of my tracks, it's hugely appreciated.
Right, well, thank you very much, Faide.
Thank
you for being my guinea pig on the first Electric Communion Conversations in Clubland podcast. Hopefully the first of many. And yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show, and I really appreciate any feedback. You can follow me for updates on future podcasts at the Instagram handle at electric_communion. You can also follow me on SoundCloud, where you can hear past mixes that I've done, past radio shows. That's soundcloud.com/Richard_Q. And finally, you can catch me every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. on Brighton's radio show called South FM.
Electric Communion, Conversations in Clubland.